mentioned that book, Road Trip, and I wanted to start with a quote from Road Trip. This quote is by J.B. Brummels. I'm glad he's not here. I could make up anything, couldn't I? Say it.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. Okay. Well, I don't know. I like this one, so I won't change it. I'll just keep it the way it is. It's short. Here's what J.B. Brummels says. It doesn't have to be true, but it ought to be honest. So he's making a distinction between true and honest, and he could be talking about voice in poetry, that the voice has to be an honest voice, but it could be a persona, a character, and that's what I've been working on, writing some poems for a character, a persona that is Emma to me. And here is Emma. Emma, for one thing, she thinks of her life as happening, she sees it happening on the back of her eye, on the retina, upside down, just as whatever you're looking at now, and whatever I'm looking at you, you're upside down in miniature. She's fallen in love and she's running away from home, sort of. Retina. Before I can make sense of it, my life moves on the retina upside down. And this night in spring, Arcturus is a pinpoint in the globe of the eye. If I were anywhere, instead of here on the driveway, running once more away from home, if I were at the river, the cranes might flap in the near dark and find a place to settle. But it is my mother in the minute front yard of the retina, her shoulders round, her arms hanging. I get into the car with a man. What will I make of this, of anything? My mother, student of broken things, turns back to her house. For me, the windshield and the dash, my oncoming, implacable road. So you can get an idea of Emma's personality. Here she is on a hot August morning on her patio alone, and she happens to notice that morning the moon. You know, the moon in the daytime is sometimes just a pale white rock. So here is Emma. To the moon in the morning. Moon in the morning, moon wearing no sandals, and half your dress gone too. Come, breakfast with me. Dance this mimosa down your throat in my garden of hollyhocks. No, don't come. Don't bother. You're like any other Puritan piece of rock, turning your back when I show up in a towel to lie in my hammock. Oh, icy moon of decency, never having lived on the plains in the summertime, find your own long-stemmed champagne. I'll outlast you, honey. Outlast August and a stinky neighborhood. Think I'll pay through the nose for my nakedness? See if I care. Ah, but Liebchen, come closer, warm up. Melt, you little ice chip, between my heavy breasts. So there's Emma, and when she has broken up, she's thinking of someone that she broke up with, and she's also thinking of that thing, you know, about how your cells, the cells of your body supposedly are completely renewed after a few years. If, as science says, the cells of your body completely renew every few years, then this me I am has never danced with you, has never sung or worked beside you, shoveling what needed shoveling. This ear, stirrup, anvil, drum, never vibrated to certain few words you gave, news you told. Today, your arm across the back of some chair somewhere, your hand holding some cup, almost as remote as the body of you, the child, that body I never knew. Toddler arms you reached with, hands you held on to the fur of the dog with, cells of your shy smile. What I do this morning, reach into the apple tree, pull fruit from its mooring, so distant from the arm with which I pulled you to me. And yet, I long for what came next and will never come again. I rub the apple against the sleeve of my shirt. And Emma looks back on love or on life, either one, as through a telescope. And love being just a dark speck on the face of the sun. You know, once in a while, like a planet like Mercury will get between Earth and the sun and be that little speck. Mercury in retrograde. In the telescope, the sun is a red disk, red because of the filter, and a prominence boils out of the corona. Prominence, those thoughts which fall back into themselves and shoot out again. You used to draw me into the room and close the door and kiss me and crush me. And one day we escaped together, left the car on the edge of the field. Smell of alfalfa drying, sound of our feet through the hay. We went toward what we wanted. In the telescope, there is the sun's flat red cheek, and on it, a dark freckle, Mercury. Mercury in retrograde, the dress unbuttoned, tossed to the ground. Emma wants her life to matter. This is called When I Was New and Shiny. When I was new and shiny and living on the border, before I was afraid, it was November and night with ice on the pond. So I built a fire at the base of a maple and sat cross-legged, my old blue coat almost heavy enough. November's fire, November's ground. I roasted an apple on a fork, dark heavy fruit gathering heat from the flames, juice sputtering and fizzing out holes in the skin. The stars with all their close, cold mirth, or rather their tinsel promise. Some folks will tell you they hear voices, even melodies. Oh, why aren't I what I wanted to be? So Emma and her love have split up, but sometimes she is surprised by memories. And at unexpected times, like for instance, when she is in the dentist chair. This is called root canal. Having forgotten to bring my iPod, wanting to calm myself and make drilling bearable, giant machine, giant noise, giant gloved fingers inside my mouth, I try to imagine in the room, on the sidelines, those who love me. My white dog in his strong-legged stance. The old grandmother who gave slice after slice of jelly bread. My father who said the small right thing at the right time. I call them up. They ring the room, protective, watching. Then, unbidden, you arrive. Your same old smiling eyes, your smart-ass face, that warm space between your neck and shoulder. I close my eyes, the dentist drills, drills, drills. I will miss you for the rest of my life. Well, Emma begins to examine her life to figure out what matters. This poem is longer because she's kind of mulling over three things in her mind. She has seen a reconciliation, a father hugging his child. She has been told by someone that they are wearing their dead friend's reading glasses. And thirdly, she has seen geese swirling in a column in the air. And these three things are braided together in her mind. Not so much bottom line as blue stem. I saw a man hugging his son. He took him in, rubbed his back, folded him to his own body in the manner I have seen one person hold another in dreams. And I was ashamed how I had a moment before been promoting myself, trying to get ahead, selling myself, when what matters is close against the ribs and next to the beating noise of the heart. And I longed to be there, my father rising up and crossing a distance quickly to hold me, a warm and loyal space, not so much profit as mystery, not so much increase as river, not so much envy as bud, not so much advance as grow. Today a man told me he is wearing his dead friend's reading glasses, wearing something she had held and lifted toward her eyes many times without thinking. Glasses she laid on the pages of her books, glasses she chose and cursed and looked for when they were lost, folded, tidy, like a little bundle of twigs on the table. Glasses her eyes looked devilishly over when she cracked a joke. He said when he took her to the hospital that last time, she wanted him to gather up this and that. And after she died, there were her reading glasses in his shirt pocket, as if she herself had tapped them in, saying, "Here, babe, it ain't scotch, but these will definitely last longer." He is wearing his dead friend's reading glasses. And I want to value what someone has accidentally or purposely left me. My friends are helping me get a little closer, not so much to conquer as to leaf out, not so much to own as coyote, badger, deer, not so much critic as Niobrara, Missouri, Platte, not so much one-up as switchgrass, sumac, bluegill, catfish, wolf. Back and forth they rocked in the room, the man holding the grown child holding his father, rocking one another in time. "Oh, Papa, I'm sorry." Each come home to this neck and shoulders, spine and arms, and hand in the hair, rocking slow as midnight rain. I saw on a wide plain a cloud of geese rising, a spiral in the light. geese like hundreds of papers in a whirlwind, rising, rising. And I wanted to whirl in that column. I held out my arms, raised my face. Not so much the power as the trail, not so much to garner as to free. And I rock with my father, Papa, oh Papa. I hold out my arms to the column of birds. I rock back and forth, mother, father, friends, daughters, sons, arms hold me. Not so much the market as the daybreak, not the rush, but the lake. Not so much resume, but to live. Not so much promote as bison, elk, aquifer, sandhills, snowbank, plum brush. Someone is wearing his dead friend's reading glasses, something that rested on her skin or hair, something her hand touched. I want to extend my hand, want you to reach with yours, as if I can stand close enough to matter in that radius where we are separate together. Not so much impress as honest, not so much merge as search, not so much first as true, not so much to grasp as to fly. Well, when you go looking for truth, you do find it in unexpected places. Emma didn't expect to learn so much when she went to the museum for the quilt exhibit. My lunch date falls through, so I duck into the art gallery for the quilt exhibit. I am alone in a very large room with quilts on the walls. Beside each quilt, a photo of the woman, or in some cases women, who put these riots together. One woman stands in a yard, holds her quilt up for the camera. She is smiling as if she loved her life. One quilt has a white line sewn corkscrew fashion partway across a red, solid field. Corkscrew not the right word, because corkscrew implies symmetry. Symmetry, too tame, too same. One quilt is filled with 4 huge gray mules, square shoulders and hips, a white eye in each face, but off kilter, in the eyebrow, in the mane. One quilt is completely covered with sprawling words and half words misspelled. The lore is my shepherd, and again, the lar is my chaper. The multicolored letters sewn on, the words spelled differently in each block and more creatively, and half gone. The lard is my An old woman leaning on her cane comes slowly into the room. We are strangers, but she tells me about her quilts. The first one she made when she was young. The double wedding ring pattern, she says. Cotton's whatever I had, she says. Says she used her quilts, couldn't hang them up. I tell her about my quilt, and I tell her I don't want her to lose her comb. I see it as dangling in her hair. So she brings her hand up and repositions the teeth of the brown comb into her white silk hair. She doesn't approve, I can tell, of the less than square edges of the quilts, of the misspelled words, of the big stitches. I don't contradict her, but I move on. Can't get enough of crooked, riot, wild. I like her. I like talking to her, leaning as she is on her cane, still huffing from the exertion of the stairs. But I want to see more, more. All there is, every cockeyed thing. No dainty little invisible stitches. Let the scenes show, let them show. I leave the gallery, stand for a moment on the steps in the winter sun. It's the first warm day. The red cardinal calls in the white tree. There is the non-metered drip of water from the building, the shadows of poles on the worn bricks of the street. The snow is melting. Water spreads on the sidewalk in 100 non-symmetrical shapes. The lar is my shepherd, the lore is my I stand eyes closed with light on my face. Behind my eyelids a lively orange, where yellow shapes slowly reconfigure. I drink up color like elixir. Everything doesn't always go smoothly in love, I don't think. And in this poem, Emma is, well, they're having a fight. And there's a train ride, and maybe that could be a metaphor. A train ride could, maybe for life. Listen, my bearded one. Listen, my broad shoulder, my no answer, my no mule stubborn as, my forgive me again. Let's stay with this cross country we've begun, this night train, this knick-knack paddywhack. I hardly know my own reflection in the window. I hardly know the name of the next station. Do you? After, or because of, the silent treatment and the same old, but ahead of no brain left at all, let's fall together in our sleeper car. Let's not solve everything. Beyond this short-term ride lies the country of the dark. Weekends sleeping in. No jump starting the day, no bare feet slapping the floor to bath and breakfast. Dozing instead in the nest, like I suppose a pair of gophers underground in fuzz and wood shavings. One jostles the other in closed-eye luxury. We are at last perhaps what we are, uncombed, unclothed, mortal, pulse and breath and dream. Well, here the two of them are in a blind on the Platte River during the crane migration. It's dark, and they're watching the cranes come in to land in the river. The cranes were silhouettes that night, thousands lowering in long strings to land in the river. We stood at peepholes in a shed on the bank, silent, watching. And I began to wish someone could see us, witness us, you and I, durable in our heavy coats and scarves, looking out into the dark. We were not jaded then. Nothing remarkable happened for an hour. No talking. We didn't want to spook the cranes standing on their sandbars, trilling their all-night song. Then you pointed toward a peephole in the western wall, turned my shoulders, mouthed a word, one word. Vapor rose from your mouth. Moon, you said. And we looked at it together. A thin, white, curved tusk, a filament, a lost string, a moon on its back. At a small window, we looked at the moon together. Well, I'll close with this poem. Here, the two of them are leaving town for the weekend, and they go on the way out of town. They stop at the ATM to get some money. We leave the ATM before dawn. When we leave the ATM, clutching new 20s, when we drive toward the Sandhills country, when the road becomes a 2-lane, when we are upbeat for no good reason, except maybe 2 travel mugs of very hot coffee and cream and cocoa like you make it. When the tip into daylight is about to happen, when grasslands begin to show in the windows, then I like to imagine our lives in front of us, ticking under the belly of the car as we eat up the road. Look, there's more. Our life together, moving like that. You believing in me, I believing in you. Fragile, we're not. Speed is where it's at. We face what's coming, grasslands parting like a sea on either side of the asphalt. We roar past. We leave little farmhouses bobbing in our wake, trees swirling. You and me, babe, immortals on a road trip.
Thank you, Marjorie, and thanks to Emma, and thanks for ATMs. And now I would like to welcome Sarah McKinstry-Brown.
Hi, everyone. Well, speaking of ATMs, that was a good segue, because I just wanted to, before I read, just thank Northeast Community College so much for having us, and Neil for bringing us here. I ended up in Nebraska 8 years ago. I was doing a poetry tour, and I was giving poetry readings all over the country, and I was doing it via Greyhound bus, which wasn't luxurious at all, and staying in some very unsavory places with some very unsavory characters at times. So I've done my share of couch surfing in the name of my art. And it just means a lot to be able to come somewhere like Northeast and just be treated so well and with such kindness and embrace. So thank you all for coming out, and thank you, Neil, for bringing us. The first poem I'm going to read for you is called The Folgers Commercial. And one of the things that I discovered after having children was how easily I cried at the silliest things that I used to be completely immune to before I had children. And I would get so mad at myself because I am suddenly now so easily manipulated by all these Hallmark cards and coffee commercials. So for a while there was the one circulating around Christmas time with the brother coming home from college. Does everyone remember that? So I modified some of it, some of the commercial for the poem, but so this is about that, and it's called The Folgers Commercial. I'm folding laundry when the music kicks in. I look up at the television. Of course, it's early in the morning. Of course, the brother away at college made it home just in time for his sister's birthday. Coffee brewing. His younger sister takes the bow off the gift her brother brought her, sticks it over his heart, says, "You're my present this year." And I fight back tears, though it's not even good coffee, and these actors are working me with ropes and pulleys. My daughter toddles into the living room. I blame her. That big head, those even bigger eyes, surprised to be breathing, delighted with the air, she raises her arms up, up, and of course, the mom and dad come downstairs to find their grown son and daughter sharing a cup of coffee, the best part of waking up. And now I'm crying, weeping, really. It's the red bow, the brother, the sister, the yellow daisies on our counter my husband brought me just because. It's the boy they pulled from the river this morning, our lilacs budding, last night's footage of another woman keening in the rubble. All that music so determined to ruin me. So this next poem has to do with television as well, in that it was inspired by, I was watching Julia Child, her cooking show, And she was working the whole episode, the whole half-hour episode was devoted to her and a woman making a fruit tart from scratch. And when she took a bite of it, Julia Child started crying because it was so good. And I just thought it was so cool. I just thought, you know, whatever I do in life, let me be that passionate about it. Let me be crying over a poem or a bite of fruit tart. So then I got to thinking, well, what would it be like if, what would heaven be like if Julia Child was in charge? So this is called Comfort Food. I come from a long line of women who insist on cooking up a religion that is more starch than cumin, calling on a God who measures blessings. Most Sunday mornings, I can be found on my couch, watching cooking shows on TV, searching for a God who is more Julia Child than Charlton Heston, imagining a heaven that's one big, small kitchen, a place where all our souls will eventually rise to sit around the table and break bread. I can see my grandfather passing the butter to his daughter while God putters around the kitchen in her white, billowing apron, measuring and mixing flour, sugar, baking powder. She spills a little salt, pausing to throw some over her shoulder to ward off the bad spirits, and when a handful of it lands in the night sky, she doesn't bother to sweep it up, because she's not the cleaning type. And she knows that all of us down here, whose lives are messy, more accident than precise recipe, are hungry. Yeah, because when I get to heaven, there better be food there. That's just how I feel about it. Good food, too. This next poem is inspired by, it's called Come Back, and I see it as a sort of calling back of all the artists in the world who have, who sort of sacrifice themselves in body or mind or spirit to follow their art. And it's also inspired by the fact that when I first started becoming interested in writing at age 19, all these other poets and authors that I fell in love with, I would discover when I did some research that they killed themselves, you know, and then I would find another one I loved and think, oh, they killed themselves too. And so it was really frustrating as a young artist to come across all these brilliant minds that had taken their life. So this is sort of a calling back and about letting go of all that grief and sorrow, so that you can stay on this earth and pursue your work. Hang up that heavy black receiver. You don't need to call those memories and invite them to dinner again. Throw away that decade-old bouquet of arguments picked from your mother's garden. You've kept them in water too long, and your lungs have begun to crave the dirt. Come to the kitchen. I'll open a jar of late October sunlight preserved for days like this. You make the tea. We don't have to speak. We can let our mouths cosset their tongues. Let our spoons, heavy with honey, do the weeping. When we're done, we'll cut the hands off the clock, tie our hair out of our faces, and clean the skeletons out of your closet. We'll laugh about how you used to dress those bones up in chiffon and take them out to poetry readings, strangers gawking as you stood behind podiums, slow dancing with your misery. Come back and we'll stay home. We'll put down our pens and raise our voices like empty beer bottles. Born again into blue jeans and sweatshirts, we'll grow the hands of carpenters, become fluent in wood and hammers. We'll break open those rib cages and build a cradle lined with breath. Together, we'll make a soft place for you to put down the voices you carried night and day, insistent and greedy as a newborn baby. This next poem was inspired by a little girl who had gone missing in Omaha, and she was gone for a long time, and when they finally found her body, it was about 5 miles from our house, And something about that just was very disturbing to me, that all these nights we'd been going along with our lives, that this little girl's body was decomposing. So that's what this poem is about, and it's about trying to find something beautiful in the horror of that. It's called After 13 Months of Searching, the Girl's Body is Found 5 miles from our house. Nights we sat down to dinner, interlaced our fingers and recited the Lord's Prayer. She was there, taking root, a seed with his seed inside her. Abandoned by the sun, lost in the thick woods of some man's fever, we can't stop looking at our daughters. And when the girl's mother appears on the evening news, distraught but grateful for a body, I understand. From the deep well of our wombs, we draw our daughters up, bring them to our breast, quench a thirst they didn't know they had, saddle them with hunger so they might stay. Let it not be his hands that claimed her. Let it be the tender dirt, the earth slowly awakening to her body as it softens in the sun, preparing her, each pearl of larva working to ease the burden, to release her from the body that caught his gaze. So driving out here from Omaha, I was reminded about sort of the moment that I first fell in love with Omaha. I moved here from Albuquerque, New Mexico, and I was driving with now he's my husband, but he wasn't at the time, and we were driving to Wayne, Nebraska, and all the cows had just been let out into the fields to fill up on whatever was left over, and I was asking my husband about, what are the cows doing out there? And he was explaining, because he's a Nebraska native, and he was explaining it all to me. And it was just this beautiful, I love late fall in Nebraska. So this is kind of inspired by that. And this is about what heaven might be like if you're a farmer or a rancher. He closes the gate and walks into that acreage of night, rubbing his hands against the cold as he kneels to hook the sun up to his blue tractor. Climbing in the seat, he turns the ignition, pushes it into gear, and begins the slow pull of dawn over horizon. Below, the black-eyed Susans wake and tilt their faces towards him as the tiny flames of their petals catch and shake off last night's dew. When he arrived, God told him over black coffee and strawberry rhubarb pie what his bones had been whispering all along. City folks are more prone to weeping because they've forgotten how to pray for rain. In the distance, our wide and wet-eyed dreams graze, slowly chewing. Every so often, they raise their heads to regard him. He jumps down from his tractor, tears open a fat sack of clouds, shakes out a storm. The rain begins a steady conversation with soil, urging us to rise from our beds. This next poem is called Sophia's Got Some Questions, and I wrote it after this one night I was desperately trying to work on this poem that just wasn't working. Sometimes, Marge, I'm sure you know, it's like you're pushing on a door that says pull. You're writing and you're thinking, or maybe you all feel that when you're trying to write a paper. It's like, why isn't this working? So I was pushing on this door that said pull, and I'm metaphorically speaking, and I'm in front of my computer trying to write, and my daughter, God bless her, keeps coming out. She's supposed to be in bed. She's, I think, 5, and comes out and says, and I'm saying, what are you doing up? Go back to bed. And she says, I just have a question. I said, okay. And I'm thinking, can I get a drink of water? Or what did you pack for my lunch? No, she says, I just have this one question. If God made everything, did he make himself too? How did he do that? I'm like, oh my gosh. I mean, that's the great unanswerable question. Here's my daughter, the philosopher. And then the questions just kept coming, and all of a sudden I realized, oh, there's the poem. My daughter just gave me the poem. So this is all based on my daughter's questions. Sophia's got some questions. The girl who began as a single cell, splitting and repeating, a question my body couldn't stop answering, is now 5.5, almost 6, and wants to know if God made us with a hammer and if there are restaurants up in heaven. Or toys. Are there toys in heaven? Is the dog going to die? And if the dog does die, will Jesus yell at the dog for begging at the table? Is there yelling in heaven? It's bedtime, and she needs the unabridged version of everything. I do my best to fit the cosmos inside a goodnight kiss, which I guess is fitting, since the marriage of lips and skin pretty much explains the origin of her. Girl who spends her days spinning in place, arguing with gravity till we all fall down. I'm just going to read two more, and this next piece is I was working on it when I was getting my master's degree with the University of Nebraska Low Residency Program, and I sent this poem to my mentor who I was working with, and I said, I don't know if it's really a poem, maybe it's just kind of silly fluff, I was really self-conscious about it. And he said, no, that's a poem, go with it. So it started out as kind of a mean poem, but it evolved into a love poem, which I thought was kind of cool, and it's so it's called What You, the tall, blonde-haired, blue-eyed, smart, talented woman who keeps hitting on my husband, don't know. Though we're in a crowded room, you say his name as if you were drawing a bath for just the two of you. As if you were lying beneath him, throat open, body reaching. You press your hand into his, mistake me for a ghost, a phantom, the woman he's woken up with for the last 8 years. What you don't know is that he and I had the nerve to get married outdoors, in the evening, in late October, in Nebraska. That the morning of our wedding, the sun rose and unwrapped a blue sky. That afterward, I got pregnant too soon, told him in a grocery store parking lot, bit my lip while he stared at the steering wheel. That when our first daughter came, I clung to him and cried for weeks, our basement apartment overflowing with emptiness. You don't know how many nights the baby screamed, how the moon looked on uninterested while we took turns yelling at each other, wondering aloud what the hell were we thinking, wishing our hearts would just break and not keep going like mules. We took whatever we were given and kept moving without asking for water. You don't know how each sorrow deepened the well, rekindled the thirst, opened the doors for the second daughter to make her entrance. You don't know that on that morning he wept, gazed at me as if I were royalty. What you don't know is that if I so much as slip my hand into his back pocket, if he so much as reaches for my waist, we burst into the aurora borealis. You are stunning. But there are thousands of people who drive out of their way to find our kind of beauty. So when you look deep into his eyes, smile and talk out the corner of your mouth, I won't put my arm around him and drag him away. I won't kiss his cheek lovingly. What you don't know is that when I walk away, it's just my way of staying. So sometimes when I do work in high schools and middle schools and I get some, there's always the students that are a little bit resistant to the idea of writing poetry, and I say, but you can, sometimes that can be the best payback. All of a sudden you have this voice, and you can talk to people that you maybe wouldn't have talked to before, or say things that maybe you wouldn't have said before. And so that poem was a little bit of that for me. Last poem for the evening, it's a poem that I wrote for my husband, and it's called Late August in Nebraska. Flanked by our small daughters, we drift through buffalo grass and wildflowers in our yard. You say our land shouldn't be so lush this late in the season, that it ought to be dry to the bone. Whatever the words used to describe what we've got, they ought to be hard-earned. I come from the desert, and when you asked for my hand, I felt rain at my fingertips, feared my own thirst, shook with the memory of my mother's screen door slamming, my father's footsteps fading into evening. Call it record rainfall, call it unseasonably cool weather. We both know that love's not enough to keep all this from turning brittle and breaking. Our girls bend ceremoniously toward a black-eyed Susan, bow their heads, and inhale. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Marjorie. Thank all you guys for coming. They have books up here. You're welcome to come up. It's pretty early. Do you guys want to ask questions of these guys? Will you guys be willing to answer some questions, or at least try? All right. Questions about poetry?
Yeah, or it could be about the stock market. So if we give you poor advice, I'm sure, but.
Do you have any good advice on the stock market?
No, I don't. I don't know anything about it.
Liz has a question back here.
Do I have to go up there?
Oh, you can go up there if you want.
Yeah, good job, sure. You can hear me from back here, right?
Mm-hmm.
I guess you guys have traveled a lot, apparently. I mean, you're from all over the place. What about Nebraska? I mean, you kind of went into it, but what specifically about Nebraska has you here, or like has you still living here, despite you being like really, really successful and creative?
That's a great question. That's a great question. Well, for me, I felt like actually Nebraska is a lot like New Mexico, all the wide open space. You know, in New Mexico, you look up and we have tons of mountains, but also you look up and it's just basically nothing but sky. And I feel like it lends itself to being a creative person or a creative thinker when you just have space. You know, I feel like when I'm driving, like just on the drive from Yankton to here, there was just all this space, and I just feel like that sort of really invites your mind to wander and go different places because you're not inundated with just all the din and the visual din and noise and actual din and noise. So that's why, I mean, I love it. And I think for me too, just in Omaha, it's a great place to be a creative person, because if I decide I want to write a one-woman play or something, I can get it put on. Whereas if I was in a bigger city, I'd have to know this person or that person, and I'd have to be killing myself to make enough money to pay for rent in a studio apartment that was probably full of rats. And you know, I mean, I think big cities are really overrated. And so for me, it's about the landscape and also about the opportunities that I just think are incredible out here.
Well, I do like to go to the mountains. I do need to, and I like to go to the ocean, the desert, love it. But what I like here is grasslands and the horizon. There's something about the motion of grasslands. I have to get out in that tall grass, that turkey foot and the Indian grass and switchgrass once in a while. And I do like big cities, so I like the contrast of it. I like to be there. I think it's family, for one thing, that keeps me here. And also, there's a certain quality about the people, the population. I don't have the word for that. I need to work on that, I guess. But so that's part of it. That's a part of it. That's a good question. I'm gonna write about that. why am I here? I would be interested in other ideas about people in this room as either why you're going to get the heck out or why you stay.
So, Marjorie, you talked more about Emma. What is your connection with Emma, and what do you bring that to?
Well, I've written a lot of poems that didn't have a persona, and I like that, and I still am going to do that. But I really got started on writing poems from Emma's perspective. It's just so freeing because I don't know what all Emma has done, but whenever a poem turns up and she's done something interesting, I think it's because that's the only novel I'm going to write. I have half a dozen friends who are novelists, and I admire them, and at the same time, that's crazy. Some of you are probably novelists, but it's like you're hauling all of this behind you, chapters and chapters. And if you revise it, as they do sometimes, they're revising all that, hundreds of pages. I don't mind revising, and my husband will tell you, I do it all the time. I don't mind revising and revising poems, 100 pages of that, but just to keep all of that story straight. So I'd like to be a novelist except for that part, but look, I can be a novelist. I can write Emma. And I have a manuscript that I'm really working on right now with 3 parts, and Emma is one part of it, and her mother is another section of it. And so it's anybody else in here use personas? It really gets to be fun when you get started because it's like you are telling the truth, but you're jumping off into this pool of this character that you otherwise wouldn't get to write those poems. So it's energizing if you're kind of in a stuck place to use a persona. See who shows up in the pages.
Any of you writers out here want to ask some questions?
How do we become successful like you guys? Like, what does it take? Is it like talent? Are you like born with talent, or does it take work?
Well, one little part that I'd like to talk about, and then I'll have Sarah talk about that, is I got a big break about, this is going to be about publishing. I gave a reading and somebody in the audience liked my reading and said, when I have a press, I'm going to ask you for a manuscript. And that happened. So that was a big break. But
No fair.
no fair. That was not fair.
Well, for me, so this is my first full-length collection, and I've been writing seriously for 16 years. So, and I feel like everything that I had a chapbook that I won a contest before this, which a chapbook is just a smaller length collection of poems. But yeah, I mean, it's just a lot of work. I mean, it's a lot of work, and I think some very talented writers don't end up making it because they just tire out, and I have days where I'm like, why am I doing this? You work so hard on some poems that might never see the light of day, but I think a real big part of becoming successful is having a thriving or a vibrant artistic community, and that's why, I'm so grateful that we're brought out here, because it's, be kind to your professors who are bringing writers in, because that's really important. I started reading just at open mics, and I always say I got my formal education at a university, but I got my real education just by going to poetry readings and open mics in bookstores and bars and coffee shops all over Albuquerque, and I met writers who I could come up to them afterwards. Unlike if you're reading somebody's book and you don't know them, I could come up to these writers afterwards and say, oh, that was a great image. How did you get to that image? Or, you know, so I really think becoming invested and becoming part of a writing community where you're at is a really good starting place, because that builds a foundation. And so, I mean, start a poetry slam, start a poetry reading, and host it, and open up the reading by reading some of your own work, because you can. That's mine.
I'd like to ask something. If each of you would say what you do when you have writer's block. It's like,
I eat, is what I do. Yeah, that's a good question. Well, I got some good advice, not that it cured everything, but every once in a while I do remember this advice that I got, which was, you have writer's block when you're telling yourself what you should write, and that's your body's way or your mind's way of saying, no, that's not what you should write. And I try to remember that it's blocked because the top 2 inches of your head is trying to write it, and it's the rest that really writes the poem. And so I know this isn't really that helpful, but and then I think here is something that is helpful, and it piggybacks on what Sarah just said, was I have several groups, they're triads. They come to my house, we have something good to eat and write, or we go to coffee shops, a couple of groups that so, you know, if 3 people is really a nice number, because if one of them doesn't show up at the coffee shop, then there's still 2. If both of them don't show up on the appointed day, you're there, you might as well write. And what we do is we have a rule, you know, that what we're trying to do is train the ear. So what the feedback we give is the listener just tries to remember everything that the writer read when it was her turn. And so they're getting training of the ear to remember all that, and the subconscious, or whatever it is that writes, is going, oh, they heard that. Somebody heard that. And that causes, or should cause, often causes you to write more because you've been heard. So that's been helpful. That isn't the cure. I don't know what the cure is, but that's a couple of things, is those triads where you write with somebody and make it fun, have food involved. If you like coffee shops, which I do. I grew up in a cafe. We literally lived in the back. So, you know, coffee, the sound of crockery, that's all good for me. If you don't, I also write alone, so I'm not saying that you have to do that, but that's one thing. And a persona might be also helpful in that, is when you're blocked writing what you're writing, be somebody else for a while and write. Or also, I've done this, it doesn't always work, but to write to the block, you know, dear block, and just let them have it. And then it gets funny after a while.
I just usually walk away and try to do something else, and that's because my best stuff comes if I'm writing or cooking or thinking about something completely different. But I mean, I don't know what the answer is, because I still feel like I have it, but I still feel like I experience it at times. But I did really like what Elizabeth Gilbert, the woman who wrote Eat, Pray, Love, she gave a talk that you can find on the internet, and it's a TEDx talk, and she just talks about how her father was an engineer, and she says, why do we differentiate between art and other professions? My dad didn't get up in the morning and say, well, I've really got engineering block today, so I can't get my work done, you know. And so her whole thing was kind of like, come on, get over it, just work, treat it like work, and even if you don't feel like it, or if nothing's coming, just write anyways. And even if you have to write 10 pages of crap to get to 2 sentences that are suddenly working, then that's just what you do. So I'm trying to really train myself to think that way. If it's work and you just show up and you do it. So, because the world would fall apart if all the ranchers and engineers, and if everybody said, "Oh, I can't go to work today. I have cashier's block," or so maybe we shouldn't let ourselves have that anymore.
William Stafford, a great poet, said, "Lower your standards."
There you go.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I enjoyed hoping with you all there.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Well, in class, we were talking about beating our inner critic. So not exactly writer's block, but kind of like we were saying where you didn't think that poem was a poem, but you took it to your mentor and you said, yeah, go with it. So from when you first started to where you are now, what are some ways that you beat your inner critic?
You all are asking really good questions. I don't know, because that's something I'm still struggling with. I mean, I'm a perfectionist and I put lots of pressure on myself, and then, you have a book and then it wins an award, and then it's hard not to sit down and think, oh gosh, now I have to be, brilliant, and then that'll give you writer's block. So, but I do think there is something to really treating it like work and just saying, this is my vocation and I'm going to do the best I can, and I'm going to all you can do is bring your own unique voice to what you're doing. If you're trying to this persona poems aside, I think you just have to follow your voice and have to realize that that's where the value is. And if you're beating yourself up for what you're putting on the page or what you're bringing to it, then you're not respecting yourself as a person or as an artist. And you have to just say, I'm good enough, and this has value. And even if it's a horrible poem, it's valuable because you learn something from it, And Ted Kooser, our 2-time poet laureate, said for every, he said he would write a poem every day of the year, 365 days a year, and usually he'd scrap half or 3/4 of those poems. And that's the poet laureate. So I think that's part of it too, is just not getting in your own way.
I think one thing that happens, and this is a small part of that critic, and I'm reminded, that there's the 2 wolves in you, the good wolf, the bad wolf. Which one's gonna win? The one you feed. So don't feed the critic too well. But one thing that it helps is I try to think of that critic, that self-talk, that critic, as it's energy. It's energy, but it's being used kind of against what I'm writing. And if I can tell that part, wait your turn, because that energy can be used on revision if it's kind of channeled that way. And then another thing about critic is that one thing that strengthens that critic when you don't necessarily want it to be strengthened yet is if you are looking at the printed part, you're letting somebody else look at the printed part, because I don't know if this has happened to you, maybe it's happened to you once, it's happened lots of times to people, is as soon as you give a printed form of it to someone, unless it's your mentor who's on your side, it's like we can't seem to read it without a red pen and start working on it like a committee of the whole, and let's tear this up. But if you hear it, what you hear reports to the heart, and something will respond in you and in your readers more, I think, sometimes, if we're hearing it. So like the open mics, or like these triads I'm talking about, if you are writing with someone and you've written with them, you've got a certain level of trust, and you're hearing each other's work, rather than, if they're being too much the critic right away on this is a draft, and already they're jumping on it. That can help, I think, to read it aloud, if that suits your style, rather than have somebody criticize it as a written form when it's just just beginning to come to fruition, to life on the page. Anybody else in here have another idea about that critic? We're here, we can kind of put our brains together.
Have you, you know how I always feel like people tell me like, well, just get drunk or I'll get high or something. Does that actually work?
Get up early in the morning when you're still half asleep. That works.
Yeah, there is something to that getting up early because your brain is that much closer to sleep, to dream, rather than, but.
And you can't, that poem that I read, it's all about, you can't sustain that kind of lifestyle anyways. Maybe for some artists, it works that they, drink, and do you think of Charles Bukowski and all these famous artists, but, they're all, dead. So that's not good for your writing career either. So, no, I just think just a certain openness, which you obviously are. You're asking questions. You're asking great questions. I think to be a good writer, even if you never write a poem, you just have to be open and observant. All the things you need to be a good human being, just empathetic, paying attention to your surroundings, and having imagination and trusting that, and just don't do anything out of fear. And I think, getting drunk or ingesting something to sort of try to make yourself creative is responding to some fearful part of yourself that thinks that you can't do it on your own. And you can.
A guy who knew Charles Bukowski said when he was writing, if somebody came around and wanted to party, he kicked them out.
I never heard that story.
Yeah, Andre over at Wayne State College knew him, and he told that story. When he was working, he'd throw you out.
So he wasn't drinking when he was working?
Not when he was working.
Wow, I didn't know that.
One final question in back.
There's been a lot of talk, about Steve Jobs that died, and on the radio on the way here, they said that he took a certain class that wasn't considered in his computer, whatever you call it, for his degree for his computer. It was completely outlined. But then it ended up, that class ended up helping him making a connection that nobody else did. They were in this box with just regular stuff. Do you find that as writers too, that doing something out of the normal that isn't part of your curriculum actually gives you more strength than to stay and kind of drive within your own realm, kind of?
Yeah, I think you do have to work hard at your craft, work at it and play at it, but also you need a life. You need, so like dance or paint or run, something that takes you out of it. Is that kind of getting at what you're talking about too?
You made different, there was different references to how the body works and anatomy and stuff like that.
Okay.
Do you think that has nothing to do with Charles Darwin or writing? It's just absolutely weird.
Well, I think what you're saying is, do you think that going completely away from writing actually makes you a better writer?
Yeah.
Doing something that,
you get something totally different that doesn't seem relevant to what you're doing.
Absolutely. Well, this whole book is about, I always thought that I could never be a successful artist if I had a family, because I would have to give all my energy to my husband and my children. And so all my girlfriends were mourning for me. Oh, she's moved to Nebraska, and now she's never going to write again. And I was really scared of that. But lo and behold, my first full-length collection that won this really great award was, most of these poems are inspired by my life as a wife and a mother. So I think absolutely, it's like you need a life. You need something outside of it to inform what you're writing about.
And reading is important.
Reading, yes. Read. It's the only way to get better. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you.
Thank you.